So, newly crowned Miss South Africa, Lalea Mswane, has faced intense pressure, demanding that she withdraws from the Miss Universe pageant that's being held, or that will be held in Israel come December. This past week saw much confusion about whether or not she actually heeded those calls, but the Miss SA organization released a statement saying that Mswane will be taking part. In fact, the organization says it was thrilled to turn the beauty queen's dreams into reality. Activist organizations have since doubled down on their calls for her to withdraw from that competition. In fact, just yesterday, the South African Communist Party joined those calls from Mswane to withdraw from the pageant in solidarity with the people of Palestine. So, for more on why there's such growing opposition to Miss South Africa taking part in that event, let's bring in Noor Ahmad from the Palestine Solidarity Fund, who joins us now via our video link. And Noor, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Let me begin by just getting your take on the developments on the days gone by. The Miss SA organization responding to what's taking place in part by saying that the Miss Universe pageant is not a political event. Is that good enough for you?
Good morning to you and your viewers, Ayanda, and thank you so much for having me on your show today and giving me the space to talk about this really important issue. I'd just like to correct you. We're the Palestine Solidarity Alliance, not the fund. Yes. So in terms of the Miss SA organization stating that the Miss Universe pageant is not a political competition, I would disagree with that. If it was not a political competition, why is it that contestants are firstly asked politically charged questions? A lot of the questions that we see that are posed to these contestants and the representatives from the country are politically charged. But also, just in terms of where the competition is being held, it makes the competition political, given Israel's history and given the oppression of the Palestinian people.
Yeah. How does a Miss South Africa from South Africa actually, I guess, aid to the kind of activism that you're doing? And I'm asking this because there are those who believe that withdrawing from an event like this doesn't do much, really, to change the material conditions of the people of Palestine.
Yeah, I understand that. We have seen those comments on social media where people are saying that, her withdrawal isn't actually going to do much, but we don't agree with that. For us as a country, we have our own history of apartheid, and we know very well firsthand what the effects of an oppressive system like apartheid and an oppressive regime like apartheid can do to the lives of people and their human rights. Just a few days ago, F.W. de Klerk passed away, and he was the last apartheid president, and that just reminds us that for us, apartheid is very recent. Our democracy is only 27 years old, and the after effects of apartheid are still very much present in our society. And what we see happening to the Palestinian people mirrors our own experience of apartheid. And Israel is a settler colonial state. It is at the hands of Israel, the Palestinian people are being subjected to ethnic cleansing, to forced removals, to land displacement, where you have entire Palestinian villages just wiped out and taken over. Palestinians are forced out of their ancestral homes their great-great-great-grandfathers have lived in, which are then taken over by Israeli settlers. This is very similar to what Black South Africans went through in colonialism and apartheid, where they were forced out of their homes and their land, and they were displaced to designated, Bantustans in areas they were allowed to live in. So there's also major control of movement of the Palestinians in the occupied territories by the Israeli government. There's a permit system, checkpoints, blockades, the Gaza wall, which has separated the people of Gaza from the rest of the world, resulting in the largest open-air prison in the world. They're essentially cut off from the rest of the world. It's similar to the past laws that we had in South Africa. There's forced detention without trials or charges by the Israeli government. Currently, there's 6 Palestinian prisoners who are on a hunger strike because they were detained by the Israeli government without any charges and without any trial. There's designation of Palestinian human rights organizations and NPOs as terrorist organizations, which is what happened during apartheid as well, where people were detained without trial and where our liberation movement was designated as a terrorist movement, and people were not able to fight against the human rights violations that happened in South Africa and fight the racism here. So the parallels between us and what is happening in Palestine are very much present, which makes solidarity with Palestine that much more important.
Yeah.
It's also about the women of South Africa, these amazing, strong women, our mothers and grandmothers who took to the streets in 1956 to raise their voices and protest against the past laws and the apartheid government. They banded together and they organized and raised their voices against oppression. So now, how can we as a country send Lalea to represent women in an oppressive state? As the women of South Africa or people who identify as women here, we need to come together and we need to organize and en masse give meaning to Watinta Bafazi, Watinti Mbuhodo, and stand in solidarity with the women of Palestine who are continually oppressed by the apartheid system there. And this is why we're calling for Lalea to withdraw from the competition and for the Miss South Africa organization to boycott the competition, because it's important that we as the women of South Africa use our voices and stand in solidarity with the women of Palestine.
Speaking of voices, where do you reckon South Africa's government's voice actually fits in this entire discussion? One almost gets the sense that given the fact that there is official policy really to how this country is responding to the Israel-Palestine protracted war, for lack of a better term, what should the government here in this country be saying about this particular issue as a potential final arbiter, quite frankly?
I think the government definitely needs to, we already have the ANC Women's League who has spoken out against the competition and asked for a withdrawal, and the Youth League as well, so political parties, the EFF, and you mentioned the South African Communist Party as well. So political parties in South Africa have been raising their voices, and the government now needs to make a decisive decision. The problem is that officially our stance as a country is that we are against apartheid Israel, but we still have an Israeli embassy. We still have an ambassador. We still have the Zionist Federation. Why do we, as a country, have a Zionist Federation in South Africa? It doesn't make sense. So the government needs to now actually take concrete action. We've had talk for a long time now of boycotts and divestments and sanctions, and nothing has actually happened. So the South African government needs to step in, and we need to make a decisive decision of what it is that we actually stand for as a country. Because at the moment, our actions and what our official stance or our official policy is, they're very, very different.
Something else that's been brought up from the other side, for lack of a better term, is that what if it's actually more impactful for Lalea to be part of this pageant and to speak out against the atrocities from the stage itself? Whether or not that's likely is, I guess, another discussion. But in principle, would something like that be more impactful, do you think?
I would disagree with that. I feel like her withdrawal from the pageant and the boycott of the pageant is actually more impactful, purely because the message that her attendance will be sending will be one of support, and not support for the Palestinians, but support for Israel. The more the world and the more we as a country give Israel the platform and the space to be included in pageants, to be included in World Cups, sports tournaments, and the like, the more we legitimize its existence and overlook the oppression of Palestinian people. We must use Miss South Africa's withdrawal from the pageant as the first step towards more boycotts and a mass-scale divestment. We as a country have always been in support of Palestine. Tata himself said that, we know too well that our freedom is not complete without the freedom of the Palestinians. So we have shown solidarity to the struggle for a free Palestine, and we need to stay true and set an example for the world and show our Palestinian brothers and sisters that we are still with them and that we are still supporting them and stand in solidarity with them, which is why it's imperative that we do not send a representative to the pageant and make a statement with our non-attendance.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of gauge the framing that Miss Universe, the Miss South Africa organization, has actually taken, given the backlash. A lot of what they've kind of wanted to communicate is Lalea's participation at this world stage is part of a black girl's dream coming true. I mean, respond to that if you can.
We are very proud of Lalea and for what she has achieved. I can imagine that it is a dream come true for her to be crowned Miss South Africa, but, in the words of Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. And you have this title, and you have a lot of responsibility, excuse me, that is linked to this title now. So we understand and we empathize with her. She is in a very, very difficult position because on one hand, she does have this dream of going to the pageant and competing. If the pageant was being held anywhere else but Israel, we would be behind 100%. But I think morally, we cannot we can't say that we support the pageant because of the fact that it's being held in apartheid Israel. Yeah.
Noor Ahmad, thanks for breaking down what you believe, and I imagine what many people agree with at this stage. We'll keep watching this development as it continues to unfold. Noor Ahmad is with the Palestine Solidarity Alliance. Once again, thanks very much indeed. Still ahead for you, we'll get you a sense of what you need to know on the continent and certainly elsewhere around the world. This is Newsfeed AM, and we'll be right back.